All aboard! Welcome to the All Aboard podcast. I am your host, Brandon DeFreitas. I am here with the OG, original commish, and league champion, John Canellos. How are you?
Doing great, Brando. How are you?
I'm good. Your introduction's starting to sound a little bit like Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones, like breaker of chains, original
Oh yeah,
champion.
no,
Like,
I'm Warden of the North, Ned Stark. You know me. I don't want to be king. I don't want it.
let's just hope that's not an omen to what's going to happen with the fantasy team this season.
It's getting a little dicey right now.
I and we're gonna get into some research you've done here on sort of like close matchups and some of the trades that have gone through in the history. But I want to get your first, like, we're halfway through the season, and at least to me, it feels like there's a lot more parity this year, whereas last year we had a handful of teams that I felt like were way above the rest.
For sure. I think there's maybe only one team that's out as of now. And with that extra week at the end of the season, there's seven more games to play. That's so much time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of parity. Nobody's selling at all. Nobody's really buying either.
Mhm.
So especially with this dynasty league that we're in, it's really competitive. It's hard to get a win unless you're Ben or Jimmy. But it's been a challenging season. I think fantasy in general has kind of been tough this year, just across the NFL. There was a lot of off-season movement and a lot of uncertainty and new quarterbacks and new coaches and wide receivers moving. And I feel like it created this kind of like unknown element in the fantasy analysis preseason. And we're seeing it shake out now. But there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of like going wrong.
Yeah.
Like a lot of bad performances, the Kyle Pitts, the DJ Moores, the Packers.
It,
So
I
it's
know
been
it's
an
been
interesting and challenging year.
it's been a lower scoring year, they were saying, in terms of points scored in the NFL. And like, I know the fantasy footballers brought up, you have Rodgers struggling, Brady struggling, Russell Wilson struggling. These are guys historically who drove points scored in the league. And I don't know if it's like the official changing of the guard or just a rough first start, but like those offenses are not moving the ball right now.
Yeah, and there's just baffling performances. Like the Buccaneers losing 3-21 to the Panthers, no touchdowns. The Packers losing every game by like 20 points, and they can't put up any yards. It's the Kyle Pitts 3 for 19 stat line that you see every week. It's like, how are these stat lines happening? You're
Yeah.
playing 60 minutes of NFL and you can't get 20 yards receiving. So I do have a stat about the fantasy points for our league. So we'll get into that later.
Awesome. Well, I want to give you as much time as possible. We could probably talk all day on what's unique this NFL season. Defense is catching up, the changing of the guard at quarterback. But what I really want to get into here is some of your research, and I've been intrigued by it because I've accused a couple members of the league of benefiting from close matchup luck so far.
So this spawned from this past week. I lost to Edwin by less than 6 points. And as I'm laying there Tuesday morning, like in a bad mood because the Pats got smoked and I lost by like this razor thin margin, I'm like, why does it always feel like these games are never decided by these close of a margin? And why does it feel like when they do, I'm always on the wrong side of it?
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that you have had two just heartbreaking losses this year, like 3 points here, 2 points there, like on consecutive weeks. So I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what? I want to take a look, see what kind of our average margin of victory is. How frequently do these games come down to the wire? And just kind of see if anybody's getting lucky, if I'm just whining and it's nothing, or if there's actually kind of a real pattern here. And I don't know. Have you ever seen The Social Network?
I've seen parts of it. Yeah,
There was
parts of
this
it.
part where the guys they do crew and they lose
Mm-hmm.
a race by like feet, and so they're agonizing over it. And they say these races are more commonly won by a boat length or two, basically saying that it's not common to see this close of a result. And so that's what I found. It is not common. And so I can get into that.
Yeah, let's hop right in. And
Screen share.
oh yes, this
Yeah.
happened on the Jimmy one too. I have to allow you to. One
We're,
second.
we're the only league where multiple owners will pull up Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah. So you should be good
Um,
now.
we
Well,
are. We
while you're
are.
pulling it up, I do want to throw out like on like the is it real? Is it whining? Like nobody, at least in my head, whines as much as I do. Like if there's something that's slightly unjust, whether it be bye weeks that I'm up against and all that, I notice it immediately. And I'm sure we're all like that. We're like, I notice everything where I'm getting unlucky, and I probably don't stress enough the times where I get lucky because it bothers me more when I'm the person getting unlucky in the fantasy format.
Mhm. There's got to be some kind of psychological analysis around fantasy football and why I think everybody feels that way. I'm
Yeah.
getting crushed, even if I'm 5-2. Well, this player got injured or this happened.
Yeah.
I think that's a common theme. It is for me. I don't view it as whining. I view it as just like
Part of the
fantasy
game.
stuff. It's really frustrating, but it's really fun.
Yeah.
So let me so yeah, so I went through can you see it?
It's coming up right now.
Okay, let me know if
Yep,
it's
there we go. We're in.
trying to blow it up a little bit, but so I went through every matchup in the 2021 and 2022 season, little data entry here to see the scores of each team and conditional highlighting whether it was a fewer than 10-point margin.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, we started with a bunch of close games in 2021. But as you go, you start to see these margins. We got 30 points here, 53 points here, 115-point margin in week 5,
Holy cat.
21.
And
That was
that
Mark.
person, oh, Mark
Mark,
with 277.
props to Mark. That's the highest score ever recorded in this league, and it will never be broken. So touche, Mark. I think that was like a Tom Brady 6 touchdown pass week or something.
Yeah.
And so you're not seeing when it was within 10 points, I put the winner and the loser, which we'll get to later.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing that many. So we were right in our thinking that like this isn't common. Ben, I think, had a 206. Great week by Ben. And so at the end of the day, I got to say the low. John B put up 57 in week 11. Tough week for him.
Nobody tanks like John B, the
I
house
think
model.
that was the low. There was another low somewhere in here, but 57, I think, might be the lowest.
I saw a 60. It looked like last week or something in this season
Yeah. We had a
or the
76
week
here and
before.
a 61 by Mark. That was like the bye week injury disaster he had.
Yeah.
I was on the good end of that. I played Mark that week, so I got lucky there. I don't only complain. So the punchline of it is that the average margin of victory last year was 36 points. This year, 31.5 points. So it is not common to lose a game by 10 points or fewer.
Yeah.
Out of 70 matchups last year, it only happened 13 times, 18.5%. So when you see it, and if you're like griping that I lost by such a close margin, it's ridiculous, I think you're justified and you're complaining.
So 20%, like just rounding it off, is approximately one a week, right? If you have 5 matchups, so like one matchup a week is close. So it's not really common, I would say.
It's
You know?
not, yeah, last year was less than one a week. And if you probability, your chance of losing that, I guess you could say it's 10%, 50% of 20%.
Yeah.
Because you either win or you lose. It's not a coin flip, obviously, but when you're talking probabilities, there's maybe a 10% chance that you lose by less than 10 points. So it doesn't happen often. And now we look at who it happens for and against. Right off the bat, I had 2 close losses, 0 close wins. Everybody else had at least one of each.
I was
You
ahead
actually had
last
2
year.
close wins last year.
All right. I'm
So,
even so far.
And yeah, over here to the right.
So I just looked at the luckiest, and like you just made my entire day.
This is kind of the the punchline here, where I have 3 close losses and no close wins.
Wow.
That sucks. I got so lucky last year to win the title. So maybe that's like last year was like the most blessed year of fantasy football I've ever had. Like it was just so everybody I drafted just went off. I had no injuries. It's all kind of coming crashing down this year. But the punchline is that most people are fairly close. Edwin, 3 close wins, 1 close loss. Pretty lucky, but he did lose the finals last year, which is heartbreaking, of course. So I think the main takeaway is it's rare to lose by less than 10. It's really unlucky, but it seemingly kind of works out over time. You're at 3-3. Most everybody else is maybe 1 game off.
So a couple high level observations. I've definitely felt this, but I've been in the most close games of the 2 years. Where we were talking about the psychology is I definitely felt like overall I was getting screwed. And you look at the results and like you definitely remember the losses more than the wins. I'm about even, which is where you really should be. Everyone else is within like 1 win or loss. And then you have you where it's like regressions insanely in the other direction. You have 3 losses to 0 wins. And then Edwin, who has 2 more wins than losses on close games. So
ironic that it's me and him with the outliers.
And this week
and I just lost to him by less.
Yeah, this week probably pushed it, right?
Yeah, I lost by less than 6. Lamar Jackson had 10 points. Corey Davis, Romeo drops passes like it's his job, 0.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just like, this is crazy. I'm definitely getting unlucky here. Proved it, but I am very lucky in one way.
Oh, he's got the trophy, showing it off.
That's funny. It kind of just evened out. I got so lucky to win the title, but then I'm getting crushed in close games.
Yeah.
And everybody else is kind of even. Nothing else really sticks out.
It's very interesting that like halfway through the year, we're around the same percentage of close games too.
Yeah.
Like for the most part, I mean, within variation, we're about in the same spot as we were last year with percentage of close games.
Yeah. So it seems like it's a pretty firm stat. 1 out of 5, maybe 1 a week will be that close, but the margin is huge. 31 points is our average margin of victory. That's crazy. I think that's because our lineups are so big and just like the fluctuation. There's so many variables introduced when you're starting 11 players. We start, whereas in a standard league, you're starting like 7 or 8.
Yeah, because we have it's a quadruple flex and a super flex.
Right. So that's 5 plus 6, so 11. Yeah. So it's just there's too many variables, and if you get a close win or close loss, it's an anomaly. So that was fun not fun, but that was interesting to go through. My last 2 points on this. Alex lost the game by 0.36 this year. Unbelievable. Like
that's got to be the worst one.
He's the unluckiest owner in our league right now, by far.
With the injuries too. Yeah, I agree.
He lost Marquise Brown and Jamar Chase in back-to-back weeks. And that's on top of just a laundry list of ACL injuries and like Tyquan Thornton collarbone, things like that. So, and then, oh yeah, last one. I looked at scoring through 7 weeks, and we are down 1,000 points, which is approximately 140 a week fewer points scored this week than last year. Approximately a 9% drop. So if you're thinking you're not getting enough out of your guys, it's true. I feel like there's like 20 good players this year, and either you have them or you don't. Otherwise, you're scraping and clawing for wins. It's a weird year.
It's definitely felt that way too, John, because I've been thinking about, I saw some of the scores the contenders put up last year, and I'm like hovering around 135 to 150 most weeks. And I'm like, oh, I don't quite have it. I'm not a contender. But this year, 140 to 150 is typically a winning score, it feels
Yeah.
like.
I should have highlighted winners versus losers here, but yeah, it's the 120 to 140 range, like you're saying. That's kind of, you get the outliers, the 150s and up, but and you're also just seeing a lot of lower ones.
Yeah.
And especially when you're, like we said, rostering starting 11 guys. If you're not getting 10 points per guy, 12 points per guy. So if you don't have Josh Allen, you're out of luck, basically, is what this year is.
Yeah.
But so that's all I had on this one. It was interesting to go through. I love stats and numbers, even when they're meaningless.
Oh, for
Nothing
sure.
you can do about this. You just hope it falls your way or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Hope that you're Edwin.
It makes my day because I've been complaining that Edwin keeps winning these close matchups and getting the statistical backing. But it also makes me happy that we've had 2 spreadsheet reviews so far on the podcast. And Jimmy's comes out and he's like, let's do the results. I'm the best team. And then you do one and you're like, let's do the results. I'm the unluckiest team on close matchups. So it is
Yeah.
kind of funny, like how that
Lies,
works
damned lies, and statistics.
out.
Can bend them however you want. That is another thing. I've been dragged through the mud for 2 podcasts in a row, so I
Yeah.
had to hop on and show my face so people take it easy on me. But okay, so yeah, that's really all I had there. Next, oops, sorry.
Before we get into the trades, one more quick observation. I would have expected the percentage of close games to go down in year 2, only because like at the startup, chances are I would have thought people would have drafted close teams at the startup. And the more years we get out, I feel like it's going to become more defined on who has a competing team and who has a non-competing team. So I would have thought there would be more blowouts in that way. But like we said at the beginning of the podcast, like it feels like there was less parity in year 1 than there is in year 2 so far.
Right. I wonder if it's just the startup is still holding, still kind of holding serve. And I mean, we have Ben who kind of like fake tanked and ended up being an unbelievable team. We have Travers who, like, it looked like he was tanking and he kind of did. He sold off Thielen, Cooper, and Diggs, but he's still got a pretty solid team. So yeah, like you said, I think once we get further in and your startup draft can't carry you anymore, like for me, I'm screwed in a year or two. We're gonna see some people who are like clearly worse than other teams.
I think this offseason is going to get wild with trades because, like you said, you're further away from the startup. The serve isn't holding. You could have teams like Mark, maybe even you, starting to like shed pieces and get younger. So I think it's going to get really interesting because my personal philosophy, and I could be completely wrong. I mean, I've played this as long as you have. I feel like it's hard to either stay competitive or rebuild just through the draft. I think you need trades to like position yourself. Otherwise, it's a long road.
Right. And retooling is an option, but I feel like you get less of an impact if you're kind of halfway
Yeah,
rebuilding or halfway selling. Or
agreed. Yeah.
but yeah, like the only reason I'm still afloat is because of my startup draft. I've bungled every trade I've made. 2 of my 3 draft picks are busts. So like, thank God I got lucky with the startup draft. Otherwise, I'd be freaking hopeless. But
We can, it's a good segue to get into the trades. And, I'm here delaying it because I know how most of my trades from last year ended up. And
you are the most frequently cited team. Let's say that.
we'll see if it slows down because I'm out of draft picks, but
True.
at least some of my early trades, not so sure how they ended up. But let's go through one by one. Enough delaying on my part.
Can you see the league right now?
I can't see the league page. I can see the
Yeah.
Excel. I can't see the league page.
Okay, let me see if I can share this one because I'll just show where I started it from.
And as you're doing that, just a reminder, we're probably going to do a 2-part for our listeners here instead of the full. So probably a 2-parter coming in.
Sounds good. All right, can you see the Sleeper app now?
Yep, I can.
Okay, so I went to league history and then you can filter the league transactions by trades. And I looked at trades made from the startup draft through the trade deadline last year. We're about a year out, so I think it's finally fair to kind of analyze these. And by no means are they done deals. There are still moving pieces here, but a year out's a pretty good benchmark. So I took this, put it in Excel. Can you see
Yep,
the
the
Excel now?
Excel.
All right, cool. And so basically did when it happened, who got what, couple thoughts, sort of came to a conclusion, less satisfying than you'd think being a year out. But again, a lot of these involve draft picks that haven't been made yet, and players who are still young. So
Yeah.
we can get right into it. And ironically enough, the last time I was on a league pod, we talked about this trade
Okay.
with Travers exchanging a first round pick for Adam Thielen.
Yeah.
You got the first, Travers got Thielen. And you did this real early. It was like 2 weeks into the season.
Yeah.
And I think you might have gone 0-2. And without Deshaun Watson coming back anytime soon, you were like, this isn't my year. And Nick Chubb got hurt, maybe.
Yeah.
So you immediately sold Travers bit and just kind of like set the trade market indefinitely. So
This is still around the price. Like, and I think like if you're looking for a startable player, a good starter, which is what Thielen was last year, and they're reasonably aged, you're giving up a first. And I think a good starter, 30 plus year old is a first. If you're going younger, it feels like it's a first plus prospects, is what we've sort of seen over time.
for sure, that's it's a 30 plus, like you said. I think a clean first, and it can't be a first that you get to use right away. You got to at least wait like half a season or a full off season. If you go like age 27 to age 30, you have to add that second piece.
Yeah.
We saw this with the Ben deals, like with me with Aaron Jones. We'll talk about that later. And then I don't know if we've seen any blockbusters for players under 27 years old yet.
The only one was a straight swap, and that was the latest trade where I gave up Elijah Moore for DJ Moore.
Yes.
They're probably the youngest hyper talented players to get exchanged. And I would argue they're both young, hyper talented players. So it's like we haven't seen someone go out and buy a young, talented star for picks or veterans and picks. Yeah.
I've seen some big deals, but I'm still waiting for that like blockbuster Brees Hall trade where there's 7 pieces involved. Travers and Alex had a big one, but those were older players. So this deal, you got the first. I think you traded it to Edwin as part of the Zeke deal.
I did.
Edwin ended up taking Sky Moore. So for your money, basically kind of traded Thielen for Zeke, which he's given you some pretty good weeks this year. He's a definite starter. You don't have to worry about it. And on the Travers side, he got 7 TDs out of Thielen last year because he had 3 before the trade, at 7 the rest of the way. And eventually he traded Thielen to Alex in the blockbuster, which involved Amari Cooper, 2 firsts, and like 4 younger players to be named, essentially. Like Tutu Atwell and a bunch of random. I think Robert Tunyon was in the deal. So this was really interesting. And I kind of feel like it's, at the time, I was like, this is pretty fair for both. And I kind of think that's still the case. You got the first pick, which you used to get an established player. Travers got flex production. And he got out from under Thielen. He's kind of on a decline this year. I feel like he hasn't had a great year. So I think it's still kind of a good trade for both of you. I don't think there's a clear winner or a clear loser.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I would prefer, even though he's hurt right now, like I think Zeke can help my team more than Thielen can this year. So I think in that respect, like I'm happy with the deal. I'm sure Travers was able to resell him, like you said. So I think it was just a good deal for both teams at the time. I wasn't competing. So a rare, probably like marginal win.
Right.
And then it highlights too that like when you're trading for picks, it's so uncertain on what that value is going to be because Travers happened to be the highest scoring non-championship team, which meant he was the 8th pick, if I'm right.
Yep.
And there was a top 7 this year. Olave was the 7th pick. So Travers could have that pick easily could have been more premium than it ended up being.
And you had no idea,
right?
But you were like, well, Thielen's not part of my future. I'll take the chance.
Exactly.
So yeah, Edwin. Yeah, I don't. We're not going to get into that one, but Sky Moore doesn't look.
Especially after the Tony trade, but
right.
Yeah,
TBD.
This is a great example, and like we could talk all day on one trade because it's like in these dynasty trades, like yeah, you can look at it right away, or you could look at it years later, and you're like, those pieces turned into like so many other pieces or trades down the line. It's like you could build a whole web.
One of the more clean ones. We'll get into a few that are just like crazy. Took me a while to trace these, but yeah, so like you said, I think marginal win for both. It was a good trade. It was good for the league, helped set the trade market. All right, trade number 2. A few short days later, you traded a 2023 second, which at the time was 20 months away or 18 months away or something.
Yeah, it was the next year too. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't the upcoming draft. It was another draft away. So Denzel Mims just can't break through with the Jets for some reason. Still young, still not over. His story's not done, but
it's pretty much done. This is a disaster trade. Not a disaster because it's a next year's too. What I'll say is this trade kind of highlights timing of trades. At the time, Denzel Mims was a few games into his second season. He showed promise in season 1. There was a chance he was going to get traded at the deadline to a team that would use him more. So there was still promise in Denzel Mims at the time the deal was done. Mm-hmm. And that second round pick, it looks great for Jimmy now because like Denzel Mims he's a free agent. Anyone could pick him up for free. He's got a second in hand. So that looks great. But it's been how long? Like from that time?
Already a year and a month.
And then like we're not even in 2023. The draft's June of 2023. So it's like, yes, this trade has worked out for Jimmy. I'm not arguing that, but I'm saying the time value of money in a future draft pick that he'll make in June or trade. And we don't know what that player, he could be getting a Denzel Mims quality player. Denzel Mims was probably around a second rounder his year. Mm-hmm. And then he'll find out a year or two later if it's anything. So it's like, depending on the timing, like, and with some context, you can see why a deal was done. But Jimmy, this is a win for him. But I'm just saying that, like, let's not just say the second is like a for sure hit, you know? Yeah.
As we saw towards the back end, and you're competing this year. So that second might be 7th pick, 8th pick, 9th pick, 10th pick. And we saw that at the end of the second round, when you did the draft recap, not many hits there from what I remember.
No, yeah.
Nobody majorly impactful. So yeah, right now, not great. Still open. All right, trade number 3. We get a DeFreitas special.
Yep.
This was mid-October, and you traded Alex Dalton Schultz in a 22 third for the 22 third and a 23 second.
So this was a trade up in the 3rd round for Alex, who had a strong team. I had a weaker team.
Right. He knew at the time because you had made a few trades, and I think might have been 0-3 or 0-4 at the time. So, and his team was looking unbelievable with the Jamar Chase, Debo, Jonathan Taylor trio. So, and Dalton Schultz was pretty good last year. Unfortunately, Dak and Dalton Schultz are hurt this year, so he hasn't done much. This pick, you guys later made a deal for Calvin Ridley. Sorry. And you got that pick back. So that was a circular reference.
Yeah.
I think the Calvin Ridley pick was like a 1st, a 3rd, Calvin Ridley and something else. I should have looked it up, but I was trying to limit it to in-season impact.
I actually remember I had already traded for Calvin Ridley, but We swapped these thirds back. So we basically cleared out the thirds in this deal
Okay.
for Alex taking Calvin Ridley off my hands, which probably was a sell low on Ridley at the time, but also we don't even know if he's ever returning to the NFL after the whole gambling scenario. So
we haven't taken a shot at Mark yet, but this is Alex kind of pulled a Mark this offseason where he took I think 3 players who essentially weren't going to play for him. Deshaun Watson, Calvin Ridley, Odell Beckham. And they're clogging up bench spots, and he's taken on injuries left and right. And it might be nice to have those be usable players instead of these kind of like luxury type players. So it's an interesting team roster construction.
So this is why we had, and you brought it up, so I'm going to keep going a little further with it. We had that discussion a week or so ago where Mark needed a roster spot to field the complete team, which we don't have to get into it. I'm very passionate. Like, you have to field the complete team to maintain parity in the league. And like, to me, some of it is self-imposed when you have players on your team that are pure stashes, where like Calvin Ridley is just a stash. He's eating up a spot. Watson, while he's suspended, is a stash. He's eating up a spot. Same with Odell Beckham, who can't even go on IR because he's not even on an NFL team. In Mark's scenario, it was tough to grant the exemption when you looked at his bench and you're like, there's Sterling Shepard, who is out the entire year. And I had just traded Mark a third for Shepard because he looked pretty good, tore his ACL. And I'm like, I'm not eating up a bench spot with this guy, So it's like,
cut bait.
Yeah, you cut bait, open bench spot worth more to me than not. And like, I understand different people have different thresholds there, but when you get to like, oh, not having enough IR spots or not having enough spots in your team, there is sort of that element of, okay, who are you stashing? Long term, that like you don't necessarily need to stash.
So yeah, it's all personal preference, but you got to fill that lineup. So
that's where we draw the line. We're basically like, you can stash whoever you want, be as thin however you want on your bench, but you better play a full lineup every week. Right. That's kind of like, it's really the only rule I would say that we truly like enforce here.
Yeah. You just got to do it. We don't want bye weeks. So, yeah. So for the return for you took the 2022 third from Alex. I feel like you made a straight up trade with Ben for a 2023 third. I think you were just like trying to make sure you had enough roster space to bring in the rookies.
Exactly.
And get back into the next round because you didn't need it at the time. Unfortunately, Ben is a title contender, and that might be the last pick in the third round. But either way, it's a future asset, which I think you still have.
No, that was probably no. I no longer have any thirds.
Yeah, actually, maybe it was in one of the Brandon Cooks trade. Maybe.
No, I've traded 4 thirds away. I've really devalued thirds, but I traded 2 in a Trubisky deal.
That's what it was.
1 for Sterling Shepard and then 1 for Mac Hollins. So, and just to throw it out there, after this past draft, I felt on draft day, we talked, John, after it. I was like, wow, those thirds are nice little like players. It's been a short like 5-6 months, and like you're about to go over Jalen Tolbert. I feel like those thirds are like not real better than the UDFAs, to be honest. So it's like, if I can, and there is value to it because it's still a draft pick you don't have to spend fab on, but if I can trade a third for a piece that's going to help me potentially build depth and win in a season I'm competing, I'm for sure going to just do that. That's my personal like take, and that's why I'm doing it. But even all that said, did I sell all those thirds low? I did. And I made this difficult on you, John, because I just trade and retrade. I'm like the Patriots with draft.
Yeah, as you can see, I didn't do my homework entirely because I lost track of a few of them. And I skipped over the Tolbert piece. In that Calvin Ridley deal, you got your third pick back. You took Jalen Tolbert. Bust so far.
Yeah.
But plenty of time. He was a small school prospect, Alabama State or something. So there's still time. And yeah.
He's very much available for anyone in the league, by the way.
We
Very,
almost made a trade with him.
yeah,
If you hadn't taken him, I would have.
yeah.
So
I thought
instead,
he
I
looked
got,
really good, and I like the landing spot.
yeah.
So can
So,
be wrong.
okay, back to your return. The 2023 second you got in return for Dalton Schultz was used in the Melvin Gordon deal, which at the time I think raised some eyebrows. But then when Javonte Williams went down, it was like, oh my God, Brandon's got this starting running back. And unfortunately, he hasn't been great. He got doghoused on Monday Night Football, which cost you a win
Yeah,
against Jimmy or Ben, I forget. And so I think it's a slight positive for you. So you gave up Dalton Schultz, who you're not going to use. So you have Andrews. And you ended up with the 2023 third, which you eventually traded for a piece, Jalen Tolbert, Melvin Gordon. So I think you kind of got more than you gave away, but it's such a, maybe it's just a non-impact for now, unless Tolbert comes into something or Melvin Gordon starts producing.
yeah. I think the Schultz year two hasn't been very impressive. He's been hurt, of course. Tough to. It's like if you're not one of the top tight ends, how much do you really matter in our format with the one tight end? So
Half PPR. So
yeah,
I think you kind of came out on top, but it's not a bad trade for
yeah.
either side. So I guess
Well,
we'll do this last one. Are we running out of time?
we got 2.5 minutes, but I think we can get through this one because
This
this
one's
one's
quick.
pretty simple.
So
So
yeah, you gave up a third for KJ, or sorry, you got the third for KJ Hamler. You later used that third to acquire Jamal Williams from me. Huge win for you because DeAndre Swift can't stay on the field.
I know.
I'm regretting that trade like crazy. Van Jefferson hasn't played a snap. That's who I got back.
Yeah.
And KJ Hamler looks pretty good and he gets open, but the Broncos quarterbacks are terrible. And he was famously open on that last play of that Thursday night football game where Russell Wilson just totally missed the read. And so, yeah, so I'd say you won this, which you getting a third instead of selling a third comes up as a win.
Yeah, maybe I'm doing a little bit wrong.
I like the thirds. I think they're lottery tickets, which are fun, and they
Yeah.
help grease the wheels on trades.
I think that's why I give them away because I don't give them away, but I like them because they're easy, greasy, grease pieces to get a trade
They're
done.
sweeteners.
Yeah.
You got a little upsetted. Well, I'll throw in a third. How about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Great.
I definitely agree with that. And I'm not defending my current year trades. I sold those all too cheap, but you know where I'm at. I'm trying to put everything on the table this season to stay in competition.
But yeah, so I think you won this one for now. Hamler could do something. He's still young. But for now, I think you win because you got Jamal Williams out of it eventually. And I get that third round pick from John this next offseason. So we'll see how that goes.
Probably already retraded. I think I have no more thirds, but
So
but yeah, no, and I think we have 30 seconds, so I'll wrap this up quick. But this is just kind of for anyone. If I have injuries to my bench players, I'm gonna look to move them. It's just kind of my personal I'm very much an open roster spot I can play with is worth more to me than waiting a full year on a marginal player. That's kind of why I made the deal.
makes sense.
So, well, thank you for watching part one, everyone. I'm going to stop here and then we'll be back for part two to complete the rest of the trades.
Let's do it.